Our next speaker, Professor James Dimock, an activist and organizer from Mankato, Minnesota. Currently, he is the union organizer for the Minnesota State University Minnesota Faculty Association. He sits on the steering committee for Indivisible, St. Peter Greater Mankato, and is a member of his local United Church of Christ. Since 2012, he has been part of an international human rights organization looking at how U.S. policy influences migration from Central America. Not an expert on immigration policy, but he's had the chance to meet with dozens of community groups and organizations, with people who have been deported from the United States, people planning to migrate, and families of people who've migrated. He has shared what he's learned with U.S. Embassy officials and members of Congress. Professor, if you'd be willing to come forward and share with us your ideas.
So I left off that biography that they asked me to send out. I left off that I'm also a father. And in 2014, my daughter, my middle child, graduated from high school, and she said that she wanted to study in Canada. You may not know it, but Minnesota students has reciprocity. They can go and study in Manitoba for the same rates. It's really wonderful, and my daughter wanted to take advantage of that experience, and she left the country. And it doesn't seem far. I know you're sitting in the room thinking, well, Manitoba, Canada, that's just right across the border. And it didn't seem that far on the 8-hour drive up to drop her off in Canada. It seemed really far coming back through Canada, and where it felt the farthest away was coming back through that international border, coming through that checkpoint, coming back into the United States. To know that not anyone in my family could just drop what they're doing if she needed somebody, that we couldn't just run right up there, that we needed actual documentation, a passport. We needed to get a visa to go and see her if anything went wrong. You also can't bring a mattress into Canada. just something you should know. We don't let you do that. Okay, you want to bring your kid a nice new mattress, they'll turn you back. You can't do that. So, the reason why that's important is because, I'm also a teacher. And when my daughter went to Canada, I wanted to know that my daughter was going to be safe, that my daughter was going to be cared for, that she was going to be protected. Right now, there's something like 1,700, 1,800-ish parents who've sent their children from all across the world to study right here in our neighborhood, just up the road. Those students are part of some almost 15,000 students who come from across the world here to Minnesota. Those students, it's not just that they bring so much to our community. And when I say so much, cultural enrichment is great, but let's talk money. And I had been told that the math teacher was going to be leaving a little bit early, so now I have to do math, and he may check me on this. But the numbers that I was given, and I went and I asked our director, our Dean of International Studies, and he gave me some great information. 15,000 students come from outside the United States to study in Minnesota. Those students spend something like $488 million in Minnesota. 1,700 students studying at Minnesota State University in Mankato. That means they're bringing close to 60, I think it's 58 and change, $1 million that they're spending right here. I know you're sitting there thinking, how is that possible? Well, a Minnesota student, if you're from Minnesota and you're going to a state school, you're probably spending a year between $25,000 and $29,000. And so for an out of U.S. student, it's closer to $35,000, $36,000. The math will and that's tuition, that's fees, that's healthcare, That's buying a car, some of them for the first time. That's buying clothes. That's going to movies. That's eating, and that's living and using fuel. That's all of the things. And that money, that's the best kind of money, because it's money that comes from somewhere else and then comes here and stays here, right? That's the best kind of money that we're bringing in. And it's not just in Mankato, it's in Winona, it's in Rochester, right? It is all across Minnesota that we are bringing dollars into our communities. My question for Brad Finstad is, what should we tell to the business owners who for generations, for 150 years, have been providing services to students in Mankato? What do I tell them when all of a sudden, almost 10% of our population suddenly says we don't need to come to the United States? What do we tell them? What do we tell them? But my real question for Brad Finstad, is still a question as a father. What do I tell my counterpart? What do I tell that other parent who's sending their student here from Holland, from Malaysia, from Saudi Arabia? What do I tell that parent when they ask me, is my child safe? Who's going to be there for them? But my other question for Brad Finstad has a lot to do with the work that I've done that doesn't really have a lot to do with being a professor. It has to do with just being a person and a Christian and a person who has access to resources. I've been really privileged to go and meet people from across this whole hemisphere who are forced to move because of the conditions that they live under. I've gotten to meet with, I came really, really close to meeting Raul Castro, folks. I mean, I didn't meet him, but I met with all kinds of people who've told me all kinds of stories. I've met with embassy officials, members of Congress, I've met with their staff, but I've never, ever met with Brad Finstad. I've had more opportunity to meet Jake Johnson and talk to him about this than I have with Brad Finstad. And that is the problem. And that's just my question there. I think, why will he not open his door to having these kinds of conversations? Thanks really for inviting me to come and talk. We are one community. We are one Minnesota, and it's really important that we all stand together. And we are all on the front lines, folks. Thanks for being here. This is really